My name is Nora Ellis. I'm 31 years old. I still live in the same house I grew up in, the one where Sunday dinners look perfect on the outside but feel hollow once you sit down. My parents love things that look right: the clean tablecloth, the polite smiles, the family photo on the wall, even when the truth underneath is cracking. Last Sunday, as I passed Dad the gravy boat, he didn't even look up. He just said, calm as ever, "It's time you gave up your room, Nora. Tanya needs it for her studio." That was it. No discussion, no warning, just a decision that my peace no longer belonged to me. If your own family ever told you to give up something that mattered, something small to them but everything to you, what would you have done? Would you have stayed quiet or spoken up? Comment below, because I'd really love to know how you would have felt sitting there. The table went still. Mom kept her eyes on the potatoes. Tanya, my younger sister, smiled. That kind of soft, satisfied smile people wear when they've already won. And me? I just sat there, fork in hand, realizing that maybe I'd been losing little pieces of myself to this family for years. That room they were taking, it wasn't just a room. It was the one place in the house where I could breathe, where I'd built my online work quietly, helped clients, dreamed of someday leaving this town. But in their eyes, I was doing nothing. Tanya was the one doing something. Dad's tone was firm, almost proud of how reasonable he sounded. "You can move into the guest room, Nora. It's smaller, but you don't need much space for what you do." What I do. He said it like it was something forgettable. Mom finally spoke, careful. "Sweetheart, don't make a scene. It's just a room. Just a room." That's when something in me went quiet, not broken, just still. Because I realized I wasn't losing a space. I was losing their respect. Again. If you've ever been told your comfort doesn't matter, your dreams aren't real enough to deserve space, you know exactly how this feels. Tell me, would you have fought for it? Or done what I did? Smile, stand up, and let the silence speak first. That night, after everyone went to bed, I sat alone at the table, staring at the last piece of bread on my plate. The house was quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't comfort you, just reminds you that you're alone even when people are near. I tried to tell myself it didn't matter, it was just a room. But deep down, I knew. This wasn't the first time something of mine had been taken in that house. I grew up in this same dining room, watching the same routine play out every night. Dad asking about Tanya's day, Mom bragging about her grades, their voices lighting up like fireworks whenever she spoke, and me? I learned early that silence made dinner end faster. Tanya was always the star. When we were little, Mom called her our sunshine. She got the best dresses, the front row seats in every photo, and every ounce of approval I used to hope for. I wasn't jealous, not exactly. It's hard to be jealous when you're too busy trying to be invisible just to survive disappointment. I remember being 13, bagging groceries at the corner store. On weekends, I'd save every tip, every crumpled dollar, hiding it in a small tin box under my bed. My dream was simple: to buy my own computer, to learn something that didn't depend on anyone else's permission. Numbers made sense to me. They didn't change their value, based on who was talking. One night, I came home to find my box. Gone. The bed was made. My books were stacked neatly, too neatly. And there, on my desk, sat a note in Mom's handwriting. "We borrowed your savings. Tanya needs a video camera for her talent audition. You'll understand. It's for her future borrowed." That word burned into my skin. They never said when they'd give it back. They never even looked guilty. At dinner that night, Tanya was showing off the camera, a shiny silver one, the kind I'd dreamed of holding. Mom was beaming. Dad said, "It's an investment." No one mentioned my tin box, and I sat there, smiling, the way a good daughter is supposed to smile, while something deep inside me quietly closed its door. That was the first time I learned what sacrifice meant in our family. It wasn't love, it was expectation. And once you gave something up, they made sure you never got it back. After that, I stopped asking for things. Birthdays came and went, with quiet thank yous. When Tanya got her first car, I got a lecture about responsibility. When she wanted to quit college to chase her streaming career, Dad called her brave. When I graduated with honors, he forgot to show up. It became a rhythm, their pride rising and falling with Tanya's dreams, never mine. I learned to build quietly, to grow roots instead of branches, because I knew no one would water me anyway. Still, there were moments I hoped they'd see me. Once, when I showed Mom my first online client payment, $50, for helping someone plan a budget, she smiled politely, then asked if I could help Tanya file her taxes. Even my victories became someone else's convenience, so when Dad said, "It's time to give up your room," it didn't feel new. It felt familiar. Like déjà vu, the same story told, in different words. I realized then that I'd spent my whole life giving up little corners of myself, my savings, my peace, my space, and calling it love. But love doesn't erase you to make someone else comfortable. That night, before I went to bed, I walked into my room, the one they wanted to take, and looked around. The shelves, the books, the quiet. I touched the window frame, where I used to count stars as a kid, and I promised myself something. This time, I wouldn't just lose quietly. This time, they'd finally see what silence can build. The morning after that promise, I woke up before sunrise. The house was still. The only sound was the hum of the old refrigerator in the kitchen. I sat at my desk, the same spot where my tin box used to be, and opened my laptop. No one else knew it yet, but that was the morning everything began to change. I started small. At first, it was just helping neighbors understand their bills, fixing their budgets, explaining why saving $10 a week actually mattered. Then one client turned into three into 10. Before long, I was staying up past midnight, creating spreadsheets for people who'd never had anyone take their finances seriously. I didn't make much at first, but what I earned wasn't the point. It was proof that I could build something without asking permission, without anyone taking it away. During the day, I worked quietly at the local financial office downtown, a simple job, filing reports, answering calls. But at night, that tiny room became my world. I'd light a small lamp, play soft music, and type until my fingers went numb. Every time I heard Tanya laughing across the hall, streaming to her growing audience, I'd turn up the volume in my earbud and keep going. I didn't envy her, not anymore. Because while she chased attention, I was learning something far rarer: stability. Still, the house never let me forget my place. When Dad saw me working late, he'd shake his head. "You're wasting your youth behind a screen," he'd say, not even looking up from his newspaper. Mom would echo softly, "Your sister's really making something of herself, Nora. You should learn from her confidence. That's what they called entitlement now." At family gatherings, everyone asked Tanya about her followers, her sponsors, her new clothes. When they turned to me, the question was always the same. "Still doing that number stuff?" I'd nod, smile, and excuse myself to refill my drink. But beneath the small talk, my world was expanding. By my mid-20s, I'd built a list of loyal clients, small business owners, teachers, retirees. I helped them track every cent, plan for emergencies, and grow savings they never thought possible. And they trusted me. In a way my own family never had. It felt ironic. Helping strangers build security while I lived in a house, that never felt safe. I stayed because it was cheaper, yes, but mostly because I wasn't done yet. There was a stubborn part of me that wanted to win right there, in the same space that told me I couldn't. Every spreadsheet, every late-night call, every client thank you email, it was my quiet rebellion. Still, success didn't erase the ache. Some nights after logging off, I'd hear Tanya celebrating a new milestone, 50,000 followers, a brand deal, a new camera. Her laughter echoed down the hallway, bright and easy, and I'd lie in bed wondering what kind of love earns applause. Mine never did. Then came the turning point. One afternoon, my college friend Phyllis stopped by. We hadn't seen each other in years. She walked into my room, my office, and stopped mid-step. "Nora, this is amazing," she whispered, scanning the walls covered with notes and charts. "You've built all this?" I shrugged, embarrassed. "It's nothing big." She looked right at me. "It's everything," she said. "You're changing people's lives, and you don't even see it." Her words hit me harder than any insult ever had, because for the first time, someone saw me, really saw me. That night, when she left, I sat in front of my computer screen and stared at my logo, Ellis Financial Consulting. It looked small, almost fragile, but it was mine. The following years moved like quiet thunder. Clients grew, referrals poured in. One day, a local doctor called me his financial angel and introduced me to his network of colleagues. Within months, I was managing portfolios worth more than my father's lifetime savings. And still, not one word of pride from home. Yet, nothing at home changed. Mom still reminded me to help Tanya with her taxes. Dad still asked, "When will you get a real job?" And Tanya, now surrounded by lights, microphones, and brand deals, still treated me like I was living in her shadow. The irony was almost poetic. They had no idea. The shadow was where I thrived best. Every insult became fuel. Every dismissal, a reminder of why I was building quietly. Because someday, I'd show them that the boring one had built something solid, while their favorite built on sand. And I didn't have to leave to prove it. I'd do it right there, in the same house, where I was told to shrink. By the time I turned 30, my consulting firm was bringing in more money each year than Tanya's entire channel ever had. But I kept living simply. Same room, same desk, same quiet. Because my goal wasn't to flaunt it, it was to finish the story. And deep down I knew that one day, that house, the one that silenced me, would hear me loud and clear. By the time I turned 31, the numbers told a story my family would never believe. I had more in my savings account than both my parents combined. My firm was thriving. Clients from across Richmond trusted me with their futures. And still, every Sunday, I came home to the same table where my voice meant nothing. That night felt no different at first. Mom was serving roast chicken. Tanya was talking about her new brand collaboration. Dad was nodding, like she'd just won a Nobel Prize. I sat quietly, sipping my wine, listening to them talk about her future like it was a shared victory. Then, just like always, it came. Dad's tone, calm, but heavy. "Nora, we've decided. It's time to let Tanya use your room." I froze. Not from shock this time, but from déjà vu. He said it the same way he'd said it years ago, only now it wasn't a request. It was an announcement. Mom's smile was tight. Tanya's was relaxed. I realized they hadn't been waiting for my answer. They'd been waiting for my compliance. Tanya leaned back, twirling her fork. "I already moved some of my equipment in this morning. Hope you don't mind." That was it. The first betrayal. Made real. They hadn't even asked. They'd acted. I stared at them, the people who raised me, and felt a kind of stillness that wasn't sadness anymore. It was finality. "You should have told me," I said softly. Dad shrugged. "We thought you'd understand." "You're reasonable," Mom added. "It's for the family, sweetheart." "Tanya's career is taking off." I nodded slowly. "Right." For the family, I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice, because I already had another plan, one that didn't need their permission. 2 days later, I called Ellen, a realtor I'd been quietly working with for months. The house across the street, pale blue shutters, white fence, had been on the market for a while. "I'm ready to close," I told her. "Full payment?" she asked. "Cash," I said. Within 48 hours, the deed was mine. It was poetic. in a way, standing at the window of my new house, looking directly into the old one. For the first time, I could breathe. But peace didn't last long. The second betrayal came quietly, wrapped in paperwork and deceit. A week later, I received a call from my bank. "Ms. Ellis," the manager said, "we're confirming a joint loan application under your business name." Just routine verification. My chest tightened. "I didn't authorize any joint application." He hesitated. "The documents list your parents as co-signers. Signature matches yours." I felt the room spin. When I saw the scanned copy, my stomach dropped. They'd forged it, my father's handwriting traced over mine, messy but close enough to fool someone who didn't know me, and beside it, Tanya's name. The loan was for nearly $50,000, a short-term investment for new equipment, and debt consolidation. Tanya's debts, I later learned. The same family that took my room had now taken my name. I drove straight to their house, hands gripping the steering wheel so tight, my knuckles turned white. Mom opened the door with that same rehearsed warmth. "Nora, honey." "Why?" I asked. She blinked. "What do you mean? Why did you use my name on a loan?" Dad appeared in the hallway, expression shifting from surprise to defiance. "Watch your tone," he said. "I'm not raising my voice," I replied. "I'm asking a question." He crossed his arms. "It's temporary. You have good credit. We'll pay it off once Tanya's revenue increases." Tanya spoke up, her voice sharp. "Don't act like it's a big deal. You have money, you won't even feel it." For a second I didn't recognize her, my sister who used to braid my hair before school, now looking at me like I was an obstacle. "You forged my signature," I said quietly. "That's a crime." Dad's tone turned cold. "Don't threaten your family, Nora. We did this for you too. If Tanya succeeds, we all benefit." That's when I laughed, not out of humor, but disbelief. "For me?" I said. "You took my savings when I was 13. You took my space when I was 31. And now? You take my name. Tell me. When does it become mine again?" Mom's eyes welled up. "Sweetheart, don't say that." "We're family, I repeated. "You keep using that word. I don't think it means what you think it does." I left before they could respond. Outside, the cold air bit against my skin, but it felt cleaner than the air inside that house ever had. Across the street, my new home waited, warm lights spilling through the windows. It didn't just look like freedom, it was freedom. Standing on the porch, I whispered to myself, "This time, I'm done being the reasonable one." And for the first time in my life, I meant it. I didn't go back to that house for weeks. At first, the silence in my new home felt foreign, too still, too neat, too quiet. But every night as I sat by the window with a cup of tea, watching the porch light across the street flick on, I realized the silence wasn't empty anymore. It was mine. Word travels fast in small neighborhoods. By the end of the month, people whispered about the Ellis family trouble. I didn't have to say a word. The truth has its own way of walking through walls. It started with Tanya. Her sponsors pulled out after a gambling rumor leaked online. Apparently, she'd been playing high-stakes games on live streams, borrowing money to cover her losses. Her online following plummeted, almost overnight. The same friends who once called her a star stopped returning her calls. Then came my parents. The loan they'd taken under my name went unpaid. The bank reached out again, this time not with a question, but with a warning. They were investigating the forged documents. I didn't have to press charges. The system did its job. Their house, our house, was flagged for repossession after they failed to make payments on time. I remember standing by my window one evening, watching a realtor hammer a small for sale sign into the front lawn. It didn't feel triumphant. It felt inevitable. A few days later, there was a knock at my door. When I opened it, Ronald stood there, hands stuffed in his jacket pockets, eyes heavy. "I'm sorry," he said, before I could speak. I just nodded. He took a deep breath. "I didn't know about the loan. Or that Dad forged your name. When I found out, I wanted to say something, but you didn't," I finished for him. He looked down. I was scared. "You've always been the strong one, Nora. I thought you didn't need anyone to stand up for you." His voice cracked on that last part, and for a second I saw the kid who used to follow me around the yard, begging me to help him with his homework. I stepped aside and let him in. We sat in the kitchen, my kitchen, where everything smelled of cinnamon and quiet beginnings. He told me Dad and Mom had moved into a small apartment near the city edge. Tanya had taken a part-time job at a mall, trying to rebuild what she'd lost. "They're not doing well," he admitted. "Dad's angry all the time. Mom cries a lot." I stirred my tea slowly. "And you?" He gave a small smile. "I enrolled in community college, engineering. I'm working part-time at the hardware store for the first time in years." Pride didn't sting. It warmed me. "I'm glad," I said simply. He nodded. "I just wanted you to know, I'm trying to do better." When he left, I stood at the door watching him cross the street, back toward the house. That wasn't ours anymore. The porch light was off now. For once, I didn't feel the urge to fix it. In the weeks that followed, life settled into something steady. I expanded my business, hired 2 assistants, and started mentoring young women who reminded me of myself, quiet, overlooked, but determined. I didn't tell them my story, not in detail. I just told them this: you don't need to shout to be heard. You just need to keep building, until the noise can't drown you anymore. Sometimes I still think about my family, about Mom's soft voice, Dad's tired pride, Tanya's smile that never quite reached her eyes. And when I do, I don't feel anger. I feel distance, the kind that doesn't hurt anymore, because maybe forgiveness isn't about letting them back in. Maybe it's about letting yourself move on, without bitterness. Last night, I stood on my porch as the sun set behind the houses. The wind carried the faint smell of home-cooked meals, laughter from another family down the block, a family still learning their own stories. I closed my eyes and whispered, "Sometimes peace isn't given. You build it." And in that moment, I realized I hadn't just left a house behind. I'd left the version of me that still needed their approval. It's been a year since that night, the night I walked away from the house that never really felt like home. Funny thing is, I still live across the street from it, but now, the only sound I hear from there is the wind brushing past the for rent sign that never seems to come down. People ask me sometimes if I miss them. The truth is, I miss who I wanted them to be. The family I imagined, not the one that borrowed, demanded, and broke my trust. But that kind of missing doesn't hurt anymore. It's just quiet, like a photo left too long in sunlight. My business keeps me busy. Most days I work with clients who remind me of my younger self, women trying to hold their lives together with both hands while the world keeps pulling things away. Sometimes I see that same tired hope in their eyes, the one that whispers, "Maybe if I give enough, they'll finally see me." And that's when I tell them, gently, the people who truly see you don't ask you to disappear first. That lesson cost me years, but it's worth every scar it left behind. Last week, I hosted a small dinner in my own kitchen. Candles, soft music, the smell of cinnamon, rolls baking. Around the table sat not family by blood, but by choice, friends, clients, people who had once been strangers. There was laughter, real and warm. At one point, someone asked, "Nora, what made you start over?" I thought about it for a second and smiled. "Because I got tired of shrinking," I said, and they nodded, like they understood. Sometimes I think healing doesn't come from grand gestures or revenge. It comes from small things: a cup of coffee you drink alone without guilt, a quiet morning without walking on eggshells, a home that finally feels safe because every inch of it is yours. And maybe that's what peace really is, Not getting everything back, but not needing to anymore. If you've ever lost something, your space, your trust, your sense of belonging, and had to rebuild from scratch, I want to know what kept you going. Was it faith? Work? A friend who believed in you? Tell me in the comments. Your story might be what someone else needs to hear tonight. And if you've ever been told you were too quiet, too soft, or too much, remember this. Quiet doesn't mean weak. Sometimes quiet is just strength that learned how to breathe. This was my story. If it touched you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Because on this channel, every story reminds us that even broken beginnings can lead to beautiful endings.